Well, good morning and welcome to Sunnyside, where we are a people following Jesus. To those not yet, man, it's so good to have you guys here with us today. We're actually going to start off service with a little bit different thing. We're going to start off by playing a game. Rather, we're going to start off service by inviting you into a game show called Guard Your Heart, where the enemies are persistent and guarding your heart is the key. My name is Corey. I'm going to be your host today. We have a couple of contestants. I want to go ahead and make your way on up here. This is Jordan Onler, guys. Welcome, Jordan Onler up here. That'd be great. Jordan, if you could take your side over here. We also have Eric Badiger is coming down the stairs. Give it up for Eric Badiger. By the way, this half of the audience, you guys are going to be cheering for Eric. Everybody say Team Eric. Very good. This half of the audience, you're going to be cheering for our new guy. All right, this is Jordan. Everybody say Team Jordan. Very good, very good. Give it up. Hey, we also have 4 audience members that we've asked to be able to be a part of this. We've told them to help, so go ahead and make your all's way over here to the balls if I've asked you all to do this. These are our volunteers today. They're going to be a part of this. Everybody welcome greed, guilt, anger, and jealousy to the stage. All right, very good. I'm going to go ahead and ask that our contestants set up our prop over here, and I'll explain the rules of Guard Your Heart. You guys can go ahead and undo the top there. What's going to happen here is just a moment. I'm going to step on down here. This is going to be fun. All right. In just a moment, our contestants are going to come, and they're going to stand in between this heart. Their job is going to be able to guard their heart from the oncoming attacks of those 4 enemies. These 4 enemies are going to start throwing balls rapidly at their faces and in through the hearts. They're going to do their very best job to be able to protect them. The goal is for them to get as many balls through. The goal for these contestants is to keep as many balls from getting through. What's going to happen is those of you all that are cheering Eric on, you're going to cheer him on. You guys are going to be counting how many balls get through and discouraging him in that process, okay? Then they're going to switch turns, and Jordan's going to have an opportunity to do it. The one who blocks the most wins the game. The one who lets the most through is a loser for life, and we will note them as that, okay? So, 30 seconds on the clock. Eric is going to be the first one. He's going to go ahead and grab the shield to be able to defend this, all right? Again, you guys are cheering him on. You all are discouraging him and counting. 30 seconds on the clock. Everybody's got your stuff. Olivia, go ahead and stand over here to the side a little bit so you got better aim. There you go. On your mark, get set, go! Oh, yes. Oh, these guys are good. Right in the head. That was awesome. Oh, Eric is blocking pretty good. Coordinated efforts, guys. That was good. That was at least, nice one. Went with the soft throw. Oh, Clay is killing it. Olivia with the throw. She got 2 in a row. 3 in a row for Olivia. 4 in a row. Stop hitting me, Clay. I'm your dad. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Balls down. Very good. Everybody give it up for Eric. How many balls got through, guys? 57. Very good. 57. 57. Okay, Jordan is now up. Enemies of the heart, go ahead and grab your balls. You guys are cheering Jordan on. You all are trying to distract Jordan, okay? Count the balls going through. 30 seconds on the clock. Ready, set, go! Good job, Clay. This is not a fast pitch competition. You don't have to hit him. Nice. Oh, good. Got 3 balls with 1. Jordan with the block. Oh, man, nice. It's getting through. Nice, Corey. Good job. All right, Aaron. Oh, it was so close. Going for the corners. I like it. All right, we got the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Very good. How many balls got through? 23. That makes Jordan our winner. Everybody give it up for Jordan. Eric and Jordan, could you guys put the prop down? Everybody give it up for our enemies of the heart. Thank you all as well for participating. That was fun. Above all else, guard your heart. Above all else, guard your heart. For everything flows from it. I know we're playing kind of a fun game, but the reality is, guys, The heart is incredibly valuable. It's a really big deal. And we have to go to great extents to be able to guard our heart against things that are coming at us. Now, imagine for a moment that I decided to blindfold Jordan in this scenario, right? It'd have been a lot harder for him to be able to play this game because he wouldn't even know what's coming at him. And unfortunately, in our lives, we are all too often ignorant of the things that actually want to take residence in our hearts. And we don't want to be ignorant. We want to be aware of these things. We want to know exactly what's coming at us because everything originates in our hearts. We don't simply want to modify our behavior as we've been talking about. And so oftentimes we do that in our society, in our churches, and in our homes, right? We see something in our kids, we see something in ourselves, and we don't want that, and so we modify the behavior. We stop saying this, we stop doing this. But the problem is, unless we actually address the origin of the issue, then all we're doing is we're modifying a problem that's going to come back and it's going to resurface in other ways. And so if you find yourself not liking the person that you're becoming, not liking the things that you're doing, not liking the things that you're thinking, maybe you go, where did that come from? What Jesus would tell you to do is he would actually tell you to look at the heart. Don't modify the behavior, monitor the heart. Jesus himself says in Mark 7, he says, for from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts and sexual immorality and theft and murder and adultery and greed and wickedness and deceit and lustfulness and evil and envy and slander and pride and foolishness. All of the bad stuff that we don't like about ourselves or about others, guess where it starts? Right here. Right here. And so over the past couple weeks, we've been talking about the importance of and some strategies for guarding our hearts against these enemies that actually want to come in and take over. And so the past couple weeks, we've actually addressed some issues like guilt and anger. If you happen to miss those messages, you can always go back online and catch them. I highly encourage you all to do so. But today, we actually turn our attention to enemy number 3. Everybody say it with me. It is greed. Greed. Now, I don't know what you think of when you think of greed. Maybe your mind goes to a politician, or maybe to a rich relative, or maybe a Wall Street guru or a big business owner. But for whatever reason, when I think of greed, my mind automatically goes to this picture right here. Anybody know what this is? That's right, it's Uncle Scrooge from DuckTales, all right? It's dating me a little bit and also putting me in the category of person who likes cartoons, which is very true. All right, but for whatever reason, this is where my mind goes. Like when I think of a greedy person, it automatically goes to Uncle Scrooge. That's what I go to. Now, unlike the first two enemies that we've talked about, guilt and anger, they have some redeemable qualities. We've talked about how there's actually godly anger that can actually motivate us to have a holy discontent and do things that actually God cares about. We also talked about how guilt itself can actually lead to conviction, which leads to confession and salvation, which is a good thing. But unlike those two things, there is no redeemable quality with greed. It's inherently evil. It is bad, and because of that, no one likes greedy people, do we? Nobody likes to be around a greedy person. If you thought of a person that's greedy, that picture of greed, you don't like those people. You don't like to be around them. Consequently, I have also never met somebody who would willingly acknowledge that they are themselves greedy. Have you ever noticed that? The first couple of weeks we talked about this. It was like, hey, how many of you guys out there feel guilt and shame all the time? Oh yeah, that's me, right? How many angry people? Where are my angry people at? Oh yeah, that's like, I know this. My wife's told me that, right? I've got that one down. Where are my greedy people at today? Case in point, crickets, right? Nobody likes to acknowledge it, partly because I think that somehow we don't oftentimes know that we are, or at least that we are dealing with greed. One of the reasons I think is greed is shrouded oftentimes in good things. Greed can be shrouded in virtues. Some people go, I'm not greedy, I'm frugal, right? I'm not greedy, I'm responsible. I'm not greedy, I just like to save up for a rainy day. I'm not greedy, I'm a planner. I'm not greedy, I'm securing our future. You see, when we put some different language to greed, all of a sudden it causes us to reevaluate whether or not greed is actually an enemy of ours in our own life, resident there. Allow me to expand our definition of greed a bit further so as to offend a few more of you guys today, all right? You might be greedy if you have trouble letting someone borrow something. Now, just in general, like I typically have a willing spirit to allow people to borrow stuff, you know? You need something, I've got it, and you can have it. You need a tool, no problem. You want some sugar, I'll let you borrow it. You need a kid? Okay, yeah, borrow mine, you right? I don't have a problem with that. But just last year, I got a truck, all right? A truck, and I love my truck. Anybody have a truck and you love your truck? Yes, I know you guys. I've been in some of your all's trucks. I know how much you all love them, all right? I got this truck. Now, I actually got this truck for the very purpose of being able to help other people out and be able to create some additional family experiences. We like to go kayak and that kind of stuff, so take the kids. And so I got it for that purpose. And so I'm willing to allow others to use my truck. But the very first time somebody asked to borrow my truck, I started thinking, well, what are you going to put in that truck? You know, are you going to be hauling manure around in my nice new 2008 truck? Like, I don't know about this, right? And so all of a sudden I start to reevaluate whether or not I wanted somebody to borrow this truck. If you have trouble letting someone borrow something, you might be greedy. If you have trouble, all right, you might be greedy if you don't hesitate to take the last of something without asking. You all have all been there, right? You got that dessert that's on the plate and it's the last one of it and you're still hungry, right? And you're looking at that thing and you're like, nobody else is moving. All right, I'm just going to grab it, okay? And I'm going to go without even asking anybody else if somebody else wanted that thing. And maybe that wasn't you. Maybe somebody else did it, and you're so mad because they didn't ask somebody, but really inside you really wanted to do that, okay? You might be greedy if you don't hesitate to take the last of something. You also might be greedy if you don't hesitate to take the best of something. In our house, we're constantly encouraging our kids to share, and sometimes we don't want them to have a whole thing, and so we ask them to break it in half and share it with somebody else. It might be as simple as a piece of gum. However, when you break something in half, it's never exactly half, right? You all know this, all right? You know this for yourself. You know this if you have kids or grandkids. And so I'm really intentional about watching my kids because they'll break it in half. And I'm always wondering, which half are they going to keep for themselves and which half are they going to give to their siblings or to me, right? Are they going to keep the best for themselves or are they going to give the best away? You might be greedy if you're always tempted to keep the best for yourself. Let's get down to some of the practicals. You might be greedy if you're not willing to give to the point that it actually impacts your life, that it impacts your lifestyle. You might be greedy if you're consuming or saving to the point where there is little to nothing to give because you've not built any kind of margin in your life. Jeremiah encountered some people in his time with this issue, and he said, from the least to the greatest, their lives are ruled by greed, governed by greed, controlled and dictated by greed. Doesn't matter, prophets to priests, they're all frauds. Now I got to tell you, when I sat down to start this message, I thought to myself, well, at least there's one of these enemies that I don't have an issue with. You know, I'm clear of this one. I might be a guilty, angry man, all right, but at least I'm not guilty. At least I'm not greedy. And that was my initial thought. Now, sometimes I'm stingy, a little bit stingy, you know, especially whenever there's like institutions that you're supposed to tip for, and I'm like, I don't think I should tip them for that particular thing. Now, my wife's been working on me on that one, all right, but so maybe stingy, but I'm not greedy. I'm not greedy. Now, I'm not trying to convince you today that you are a greedy person because I don't want you walking away feeling guilty about something or angry at the pastor for stepping on your toes. Otherwise, we'd completely undo the things that we've done the last 2 weeks, okay? I do want you to know that greed is more prevalent in most of our lives than we like to actually admit. That greed is a bigger issue in our culture and in our churches and in our homes and in our hearts than what most of us would naturally be able to see for ourselves. The writer of Proverbs actually says it this way. He says, if a bird sees a trap being set, it actually knows to stay away. It's an amazing thing. Like birds, we call people bird brains when we think that they don't have any intelligence, right? But a bird brain knows when there's a trap being set and it knows how to stay away. That's not safe. It's not good. But listen to what he says. But these people, they set an ambush for themselves. They are trying to get themselves killed. Such is the fate of all who are what? Greedy for money. It robs them of life. You see, greed is an ambush enemy, and in my opinion, he's a bit sneakier than the other enemies that we've talked about the past couple weeks. And so let's be on our guard, because greed has the ability to take away our life, to take away our joy, to take away our purpose, to take away our dependence on God, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, throughout this series, we've been talking about each of these enemies in regards to this debt dynamic that comes along with them. What makes these enemies unique is that they inevitably affect the relationships with others. The first week that we actually took a look at guilt, we actually said guilt is actually saying, I owe you. In other words, I did something to offend you. I did something wrong. I failed to do something, and I owe you an apology, right? I need to make it up to you. I owe you something. And what happens is it actually creates an imbalance in the relationship and a debt relationship. Now I feel like I owe you something, and it affects the relationship. In the same way, when we took a look at anger, that's actually saying, no, you did something to harm me. You robbed me of something. You took something from me, and now you owe me. Same thing, imbalanced relationship, just in a different way. You're holding something against somebody else, and now that relationship is strained. Today, as we take a look at greed, what greed is really saying is, I owe me. I owe me. The first week, we discussed how sin actually has three consequences. There's this threefold effect of sin. And most of the time when we think of the consequences of sin, we go immediately to separation between us and God. And that's exactly what sin does. It separates us from a perfect, holy God when we do things that are contrary to his nature, and we do it anyway. But that's not the only effect of sin. It also alienates us from others. It keeps us from being able to have right relationships with others. It creates an imbalance in relationship with others. But this third effect is what we're actually dealing with today when we talk about greed. It actually creates a bondage to self. We are inherently selfish individuals and beings, but when we sin and when we give in to sin, what happens is we become even more self-centric. And the enemy of the heart, known as greed, thrives in this third effect of sin. Greed drives people to self-centeredness and ultimately selfishness. It causes us to be concerned about self, and when greed takes hold of our heart, it actually makes it really, really hard for us to see outside of our own situation and to be able to see the needs of others. And ultimately, it makes it really, really hard to see and depend on the goodness of God. Jesus was talking to some Pharisees, and he looks at them and he's kind of pointing out a big problem in their lives. And I think this is applicable to most of us today. He says, for you are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish. Behavioral modification. You're so careful about what you're presenting to other people and what you're allowing to slip out of your mouth. But on the inside, you're filthy. You're full of what? Greed and self-indulgence. You see, the world promotes this way of thinking. Look out for number one. Get what you can. Climb the ladder at whatever expense. Don't let anyone cheat you or get the better of you. Greed and self-indulgence. You know, if you want to see greed or selfishness rise up, just go to a hearing where inheritance is being divided up among family. Have any of you all experienced this, like on a personal level, or seen what it's done to somebody else's family? Man, I tell you, you go to a hearing where the inheritance is being divided up, and I'll show you greed and selfishness. Inevitably, it rises up. So oftentimes, this process strains the relationship of people who typically love one another, who care about each other. But money and inheritance somehow has a way of being able to get in between people. Oftentimes, godly people in these situations become greedy and selfish because they start to believe that I owe me. I deserve this. It is rightfully mine. And families get devastated and divided over pennies, guys. A person doesn't have to leave behind a lot of stuff, but for whatever reason, that stuff has the ability to stand in between. And because of the bondage to self and this declaration that I owe me, it inevitably affects the relationships around you as well. As a matter of fact, Jesus had an encounter with a guy that was dealing with this very thing in Luke chapter 12. So if you've got your Bibles, go ahead and open them up, turn them on to Luke chapter 12. We're going to sit in this passage as we learn some more about what Jesus has to say about this. And he says this in verse 13. And someone called from the crowd, said, Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me. What's going on here, guys? Just what we talked about, right? There's an inheritance that's being divided up, and somebody thinks that they deserve something, that they are owed something, and they're not getting it, so he brings it to Jesus, which is really interesting because Jesus' response is kind of telling, right? He says, divide up this estate, and Jesus replied, Friend, who made you a judge over you to decide such thing as that? Now think about this for a moment. Jesus is going around, he's declaring these wonderful things about God, he's performing all of these miracles, like he is in high demand. And this guy has an issue with his personal inheritance that really only affects him, yet he's jeopardizing the teacher's time about this thing that's so important to him. I'm amazed. I'm amazed that this is what this guy decides to bring to Jesus. I wonder how many of us have ever brought things to Jesus when we feel wronged or slighted, hoping that Jesus would actually side with us on the subject, but Jesus is actually not on your side because there's something he needs to address in you, and that's exactly what he does next, right? And not only does he say, hey, why are you wasting my time? And then he says, beware, guard against every kind of greed, because life is not measured by how much you own. Now imagine this kind of caught this guy off guard because he's asking a very practical question. Can you help me figure out how to get my brother to actually give me what's rightfully mine? I'm not greedy, Jesus. That's not the issue. I'm asking you to deal with something that is unjust and it's unfair. It's rightfully mine. I'm not being greedy. Yet Jesus goes on to tell a story, and this story is really interesting because it has absolutely nothing to do with the practical thing that this guy is looking for, but it deals with this guy's heart. It deals with the issue actually at hand that Jesus actually sees. It deals with something that's internal, that's not external. And so he goes on to tell this story. He says, a rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops, and he said to himself, what should I do? I don't have enough room for all of my crops. Then he said, I know, I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. Then I'll have enough room to store all my wheat and all the other goods. Now, at the onset of this, you all might be looking at this going, hey, that's pretty wise. That's pretty good stewardship. Like he's got a bunch of stuff. He doesn't have enough place to put it. It's got to go to waste. And so he's got the resource. He should just build bigger barns, right? Okay, that's fine and dandy, but then Jesus lets us into some other aspects, some things that are going on inside that actually need to be dealt with. Because then he goes into saying this, and I'll sit back and I'll say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not to have a rich relationship towards God. You see, Jesus, in this particular passage, as well as in other places that he talks about this, he makes a strong correlation between the pursuit of worldly wealth, and he contrasts that and puts it in opposition to the pursuit of heavenly riches. Over and over again, he pits these things and he says, guys, you can't actually pursue both of these things primarily in your life. You either love one and hate the other, or vice versa. You cannot serve both God and mammon. They cannot both be your chief pursuits. If you're pursuing worldly wealth, then you are not going to be rich towards God. At the same time, if you're pursuing richness towards God, then worldly wealth, man, that should be a peripheral thing in your pursuit. He's basically telling this guy who's coming to ask him to settle this inheritance dispute, he's telling him not to be worried about being wronged by his brother or being cheated out of his inheritance. Instead, he should be concerned with his relationship with God. See, this guy wanted him to solve this practical issue, but Jesus actually is challenging an internal issue, an issue of his heart. He's saying, what's your priorities? What's your focus? What are you actually thinking about? You have the Son of God here in your midst, able to impart any kind of wisdom, and you're asking me to settle an inheritance dispute, bro. Let's think about some other things. Some people are always greedy for more, but the godly love to give. You see, when you come to the realization that you're actually under attack by greed, when you come to the conviction that greed actually may be more of an issue in your life than what you care to think, when you come to the fact that greed is trying to create a residency in your heart, and you go, I do not want that to be my case. I don't want that to be my issue. I don't want that enemy to come in undetected in my life. We are actually given a very clear defense against greed. You see, the first week, as we talked about this remedy to the enemy, we talked about how confession is actually the remedy for guilt. When we grab hold of that guilt in our life and we confess it to God and he cleanses us, and we confess it to others and we are healed. That's the remedy for guilt. Last week when we talked about anger, we talked about how we would grab anger, right? And we would pull it away from us, and we realized that we needed to let go of that debt, that they don't owe us anymore. That's forgiveness. Forgiveness is the remedy for anger. This week, what we'll see, the remedy for greed is generosity. Generosity is the remedy for greed. I want to do something. I have Jordan come on up here real quick, and because where is he at? Jordan. There he is. I'm going to do this illustration here real quick. I've got some money in my hands. It's actually $1,000. It's $100 times 10, and we're going to do this kind of physical, tangible thing. I'm going to go ahead and hand this to Jordan. I'm going to hand that to Jordan. And I'm going to ask him to actually to distribute this out, okay? What's going to happen is I want each of you guys to grab hold of this money. I want you to feel the money. If you want to smell the money, you can. That would be weird, but you can, all right? And then what I want you to do is I want you to take it. I just want you to hand it to the next person. And I want you to pass it around so everybody has an opportunity to be able to have physically this money in your hand. And I want you to pass it around to someone else. How many of you guys, by the way, is that money yours? No, it's not yours. I need to hear this from you guys. Is that money yours? No. After you get done with that, you'll pass it back up. Jordan will have it, and he'll bring it to me, okay? Now, here's a phrase that you guys have probably heard. Money is power. Have you all heard that phrase before? Yes. And I actually believe that phrase to be true, but maybe in a different way than what it was meant. See, money is power, but rather it actually has power over us. There's actually psychological principles about the handling of money. Dave Ramsey actually talks about kind of the benefit side of this. When you actually physically, tangibly have money in, it's a lot harder to give it away, to spend it on stuff, right? There's something there. But it also has that same effect when it comes to greed. It's hard to actually hand it over. Money has power over you if you hold on to it. But it loses its power over you when you give it away. It's just the same way that guilt loses its power when you bring it to light, and anger loses its power whenever you release it, right, and you let it go. Greed loses its power when you give it away. And when you start seeing your resource as temporary management of God's stuff, it's a lot easier for you to part with it, right? There may be some kind of temptation for you when you're holding this money for a moment to be able to kind of hold on to it a little bit longer than what you ought to, right? But ultimately, you know that that's not your resource. So how hard was it for you to be able to give it to somebody else? It wasn't very difficult, right? It was pretty easy for you to grab hold of it, and pass it on to somebody else, and pass it on to somebody else, because you knew already it's not yours. And there's great accountability in here for you not to keep it, right? So you just pass it along. Ultimately, God actually wants us to see our stuff, the things that he's put in our possession, is his stuff. To see it in that same way. And every time that we actually let it go, it loses power over us. Give stuff away, and greed loses whatever power that it had on your life. It loses hold on you when you let go of it, be it your money or your possessions or your time or your focus, whatever you would count as your treasures. When you give it away, when you live open-handed, it all of a sudden no longer has a hold on you. Jesus ends up turning to his disciples, as he often does. He finishes his story in this interaction with this guy asking about the inheritance, but he has more to say about this issue of greed. And so he turns to his disciples and he says, let me give you all some further instruction and insight about what it looks like to guard your heart against greed. Because this is a big deal, and it's a bigger deal than what you might think of. And so he goes on to talk to him. He says, again, this is his disciples talking about, don't be concerned. Don't be worried. Don't be anxious. Don't be fearful, okay, about what to eat and what to drink. In other places that this story is accounted, it also says what to wear. These are basic provisions of life, right? Our basic necessities. But he says, I don't want you to be concerned about your basic necessities. Don't worry about such things. Why? A couple reasons. One, first of all, these things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers all over the world, okay? These thoughts of your basic needs and having enough to be able to supply for that becomes the primary thought of most people living around you, but not so with you. Not so with those of you that believe that there's a God, that Jesus Christ died on the cross for you and that his Spirit fills you. Not so with you, because your Father already knows your needs. He's already completely aware of what it is that you actually need. And then he goes on to say, seek the kingdom of God above all else, and he will give you everything that you need. Okay, above all else, guard your heart. Here Jesus says, right, seek the kingdom above all else. There's a correlation to this, guys. If you want to guard your heart above all else, then you need to understand that to seek the kingdom of God first is actually a guarding of your heart against this issue of greed. And guess what? Jesus already knows what you need, and he will give you everything that you need. And then he goes on to say this, so don't be afraid, little flock. There it is. This fear, this concern, this worry that Jesus is actually addressing. He's not talking about the practical, he's talking about the internal. He's talking about something that's deep inside of us, and that is what happens with greed. I know that greed leads to self-centeredness. We've talked about that. But I truly believe that most greed is actually rooted in fear. Think about it. We get greedy when I fear that I won't have enough. When I fear that I might miss out on something. When I fear that I'll have to settle for something less than what I expected or hoped for. When I fear that God won't actually provide for me. That's it. That's the heart of the issue of greed. I fear that God won't actually provide. Somewhere deep inside, greed's chief lie is that God won't really take care of you. And if he won't take care of you, then I have to. If God won't, then I owe me. I've got to. I deserve it, and I must look out for myself. And I think many of us, unfortunately, have bought into this lie. I don't believe that many of us actually desire to be greedy. We just don't want to run out. We don't want to go back to living paycheck to paycheck. And so what happens? We get more, and we save more, and we gain more. And the funny thing is, it's never what? How much is enough? Just a little more. It's never enough. It never satisfies. You know why? Because it never takes away the fear. The fear still exists, and greed actually grows stronger. And so Jesus continues on in this passage, and he actually gives us some insight into what his remedy is. So don't be afraid, little flock, for it gives your Father great happiness to give you the kingdom. Like God wants to give to us. And then he tells us this. He says, so sell your possessions and give those in need. This will store up treasures for you in heaven. What's his remedy? How do we guard our heart against greed? By giving. Generosity is the solution to greed. Generosity is not only a virtue. People don't like greedy people, but people like generous people. It is not only a virtue, though, it is actually a declaration of trust and dependency on God. Every time we give something away, we no longer have it for ourselves. We can no longer store it. We can no longer save it. And therefore, every time we give something away, we're saying, God, I trust that you're going to provide back for me. You see this relationship that this has? I can give because I know that my God will provide. I recently got a Tabor check refund in the mail. Any of you guys get this thing? Anybody want to celebrate Colorado government? This is awesome. I love this. This is great. Unexpected. Didn't know about this particular law. Love the law, by the way. That's great. All right. I get a check in the mail. This is kind of nice, completely unexpected. And my first thought as I got this check in the mail is, I've had these projects that I've been wanting to do, and I didn't have the resource to be able to do them. But I need to do this bathroom renovation that I've been trying. I really want these trees from this landscaping thing that I've been wanting to be doing. And so I got this check in the mail without consulting my wife. It was already I know what I'm going to do with this money, right? I've already got it planned out and ready to go. Just proceed, all right? I've got the resource. And then I thought to myself, I probably need to check my bank account first. I need to think about this before I just go spend it. So I go to my bank account and I realize, man, we're actually underfunded in our emergency fund because we did this vacation thing. We had some unforeseen medical and vehicle expenses. And it's like, man, it wouldn't be really wise to spend that now. And so I forewent the ability to actually get something done, in order to be able to go, let's put this money into the savings, which is a very good decision, right? Good job, Corey. You did not spend that money without your wife knowing, and you put it in savings. That's a good thing, all right? That's a good thing. Jordan, go ahead and give me my money back. I know you've been sitting on it over there. So what's interesting enough about this, thank you, sir. I gave away hundreds and I got a 50 in here. I don't know how that worked. We'll talk about that later, Jordan. What's interesting enough about this is that I got to thinking, I didn't even ask God what he wanted me to do with his stuff. I didn't even ask God what he wanted me to do with his excess. Partially because I had a hard time thinking of it as excess, because I already had plans for it. I already had ways to spend it, right? I already had ways to save it. But if an unexpected check in the mail that comes from our government is not excess, guys, I don't know what is. Have you ever noticed this about yourself? If you have a need, if you have a lack, you have absolutely no problem bringing that to God, right? Oh, God, I need this. I'm lacking this. I need you to step into this. We don't have any problem bringing that need to God, but how rarely do we actually go to God when we have excess? Lord, what do you want me to do with your excess? And so my wife and I, we spent some time, we just asked the Lord, what do you want us to do with your stuff? What do you want us to do with your money? And I clearly heard him. He said, give it away. So I said, Lord, let me clarify for you. What do you want me to do with your stuff that would actually benefit us? And you know what? He gave me the same stinking answer. Give it away. Something incredible happens when you give stuff away. Not only is it better to give than to receive, but when you give, it becomes a blessing to someone else. When you give, it guards yourself against this enemy called greed he's vying for your hearts. When you give, you declare your dependency on God, saying, God, I don't trust in this to make things right. I don't trust in this for my security. I don't trust in this for my retirement. I don't trust in this for my day-to-day provision. I trust in you because you are my provider. And so that money that you all have been passing around, it's actually from that Tabor check. This is not the church's money. This is God's money that he's given to me through the government of Colorado, okay? And what I need you all to know about this is that God said, I want you to give this away. And so I said, Lord, how do you want me to give this away? And he goes, you get to decide that. So what I want you all to hear today is that this resource is actually here for you. If you have a need, if you've been struggling, if you have some difficulties, you've been asking the Lord, will you provide for my lack? I want you to have a conversation with me after service. And just privately, I want to be able to give you a Benjamin blessing. I might not be able to completely meet the need, but I want to be able to meet that need in some way. And something crazy happened last service when this happened. I gave out the money, I sent it out, and you know what happened? I got more back. I got more back because some people understand this principle. And so I'm telling you guys, I'm serious about this. If you have a need, I want you to come talk to me about that. And we want to be able to step into that need. The rest of it that doesn't get given away is going to go to our Campaign Connect because we desperately need to be able to provide some resources for that, for some of the other missional things that we're going to be doing. I'm going to ask you guys to stop resisting, stop grabbing, stop hoarding, stop holding, and instead give. Give something somewhere. Some of you might be asking, what should I give? And I would say if you're greedy, it really doesn't matter. Like what you should give or what you should give to. You just need to give something somewhere. Now, I think that there are some good stewardship principles that we have, but the remedy for greed is generosity. And so for your benefit, just give something away. Just start there. Release the power of greed in your life. Others of you might be asking, well, how much, Corey? How much should I give? Maybe all of it if you don't start giving now. Like you might need to give it all away. I don't know, but the Lord knows that. And so if you ask him that question, I'm confident that God not only cares about you, but he also wants to speak to you. And he wants to speak to you in this area. He will give you a dollar amount. He will give you a specific thing that he actually wants you to share. And he wants to give away. Now, God, the scriptures actually do give us some guidelines as to how to guard against greed. The scriptures actually point to practices of percentage giving, and I think that's a great place to start. I actually had a friend of mine ask me the other day, he's like, as a pastor, do you tithe? And I said, yes, I tithe. Of course I tithe. No doubt that I tithe. I give a percentage of what I have. And some people might go, well, Corey, as a pastor, why do you give to the church that's actually providing for your salary? And I go, I don't. I give unto God. I set aside my first and my best to God because I don't want greed to take hold of my life. I set aside my first and my best for God because I want to make sure He knows that I'm actually depending on Him. I set aside my first and my best because I truly believe that what we're doing here is actually making a difference in other people's lives and maybe their eternities. And so I give unto God. I just happen to give through the church. And I would encourage you, if you're not doing something like that, that you would start somewhere. Because every time I give, I guard my heart against greed trying to take residence. So let's put this into practice, guys. Let someone have the better seat. Hold the door and let somebody else go first. While driving, let someone cut in or have the better parking spot. I know this is hard. Let someone borrow your beloved thing. Create margin in your budget so that you're able to give. Look for someone who has a need. Pay for someone's coffee or meal after church today. Past couple weeks, we've been giving you all some hand motions to be able to help remember. And as you're processing this stuff and you're doing some internal dialogue and having conversations with God, practice these hand motions of confession, right? Practice these hand motions of forgiveness. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to place our hand on our hearts. And we're going to practice the remedy against greed. We're going to grab hold of greed. And the remedy of greed is giving and generosity. So we're going to extend that, and we're gonna pry open our fingers because it's so hard sometimes to let go of our stuff. But when we do so, something incredible happens. When we live open-handedly, not only are we giving and loosening the grasp of greed in our lives, we're also creating an opportunity for God, a platform for Him to give to us so that we can give to others, so that He can refill what we've given, so that we might be able to be a blessing to others. And so we're gonna take that greed and we're going to bless others. I want you guys to do that with me one more time. Grab hold of that greed in your heart and become generous. Our God is Jehovah Jireh. My Lord will provide. He's the giver of all gifts, the sustainer of my soul and my life, the one who tells us not to worry, but instead seek the kingdom, and He's got our back. I don't owe me because my God's got me.